war during the regular season, it is now the Knights Arena Valorant Challengers North America mid-season face-off day 1. But, as many words as that might be, we're excited to be jumping into the mid-season face-off to see what the best in North America can bring to the table from the group stages. But before we get into all of that, I want to remind you guys at home, again, join the fan zone. If you've been watching us all season long, you know the fan zone gives you an opportunity to interact with the players during the post-match interview. Your question could be read aloud on air. It doesn't have to be serious. Sometimes it's just asking what a player's favorite cereal is. It's a lot of fun. Head on over to pks.gg/fanzone. But it's time to bring in my analysts for the day here. We've got former world champion in Elite and Roy. Sorry, Roy. Listen. I'm not trying to throw jabs. You know I love you, Roy. Also known as Strong Legs. Definitely has plenty of accolades to his name as well. Roy, you've probably been watching all season long. Just thoughts as we come into the mid-season face-off. What we saw from these teams during the group stages.
So, I mean, DSG's had a pretty rough season so far. I think M80 is #1 seed. They've done extremely well so far. Their top players have been amazing. And DSG's been a little bit rough. They've had a bit of a roster change with Exalt for Riku, their stand-in, who's now also causing a role swap between Ziff and Riku. So Riku's now the Sentinel player. Ziff is now the Flex/Initiator player, so he's taken over Exalt's role. And I think that's caused a little bit of probably some kind of concerns regarding how they're going to be performing in this matchup. But I'm curious to know what you guys think as well.
Well, we'll take a look at that matchup. That's going to be our first match in the day. But first, let's go ahead and take a look at our standings as well from the first split. If you guys missed any of the action, this will give you a brief idea of where the teams end up sitting in regards to points, which is ultimately the currency of the norm for challengers teams. So at the top, you have M80, a team that had an incredible group stage run, suffering only one loss at the hands of the Guard, who is #2. Who also suffered only one loss at the hands of TSM, who's #4. G2 also suffering one loss. That was kind of a surprising one too, if I'm not mistaken. Turtle Troop.
Oh, riggedy, right.
Oxygen, and Faze rounding things
out. What up?
Faze also barely making it
shall
far. They were kind of in desperate position because their fate was not in their hands, Em.
Yeah, and looking
this guy's got lucky. Turtle Troop kind of fumbled.
I'm looking at Disguise, who we're watching first versus M80.
If we're being honest,
#8, I don't want people to, think of them any differently or discouraged as we're going into today, because I feel like they're still a force to be reckoned with. And I mean, they did face off versus M80, who only lost once versus the Guard, like you were saying. But I feel like we're going to see a whole different team today from them.
I think there's
who'd they lose
incredible
to,
leadership behind that DSG roster. You look specifically at the in-game leader in Steel. You also have a coach in Ocean. These guys have years of experience playing in TAC FPS. There's no way they're going to let the ship sink that easily. Taking a look at our schedule for the day, we'll see what matches we're going to be seeing here, as we've got 2 best-of-3s, and we're going to see how things are going to shake down for our opening matches here in the mid-season face-off. Kicking things off, we've already mentioned it. It's going to be M80 versus DSG. Later today, we will be jumping into TSM versus the somewhat freshly minted Moist Moguls. They were coming into this group stage known as Breakthrough as one of the open qualifier teams. DSG also an open qualifier team. But that first match, let's shift our focus to that one, because I think it's the one most people are wanting to see, as it again is M80, who has had an incredible group stage run, and DSG, who took their bumps and bruises. But Roy, looking at M80, it's no surprise that this team did well. I mean, it's basically the former Ghost Corps plus a little bit of extra firepower.
For sure. I mean, they've added on EU to their Ghost Corps, right?
Right,
so I think
I can't hear the guys.
Circling back to that, Steel and OD have brought up some of the best talents in North America, actually, throughout their entire tenure in their careers, right? So we can't really downplay that for any reason whatsoever. They have a system. They've proven a track record of developing talent. So I think that's worth noting. That I do agree with Emily. I think DSG could easily surprise us, and we could see a completely different force right here. Plus, there's pressure on M80 because they are the #1 seed. But on the other side, M80 do have Happy, right? That guy's a legend in the making, right? Like, not in the making, but he's had a crazy career, amazing history. And the fact that he's,
I mean, I do
the
kind of
coach
feel
and
like
he's kind of like the
this
head
guys
of the,
could be a trap
M80
game for
side.
M80.
It's so interesting to see their development and how well they've been playing recently.
And
like,
looking at these players,
realistically-
Nismo and EU,
Oh, I just
these
realized
are two
this
of the
is bumped
more
up way fucking
supporting
loud.
role players, and still their
Like,
stats are
realistically-
insanely high for the roles they fill.
Yeah, I'm looking at this here, and Nismo is a player.
This is one of those games where M80 could be looking a little too far forward.
Studying for
You know what I
such
mean?
a long time, and look at the stats from both EU and Nismo as support agents and flex. They're really doing their job initially. Like, they're setting up their team to succeed, but also getting the picks that they need for that win too. And also very important as a support player is setting up your duelist, right? Your duelist for their team is Koala Noob to just succeed and get in there to do his job. So Nismo is a player that I'm very excited to watch today.
Yeah, so to talk about the duelists as well,
So
I think it's worth mentioning as well that
MADG? Yeah,
Koala. So this is now we're going into kind of the head-to-head from their last matchup, right? Because DSG has played M80 2 weeks ago. In that series, Koala Noob went 13-4 for first kills, first death. That's impressive in itself. But now I'm going to talk about the real point. He went 48-15 in that series, Bach. That's a plus 33. Now, compared to his kind of head-to-head matchup, right? This is like a zoomer matchup between Koala and Clear. Clear went 13-28, minus 15. That's a plus 33 compared to a minus 15. 3-4 on the first.
We kind of got to talk about the M80.
So, I mean, there's a massive. So there's a support difference. There's
Jersey,
an opening success difference between
just a little
these
bit,
two
chat.
teams.
Can we talk about it?
I mean, one of the biggest numbers that jumps out when we were getting
What up?
prepped for
Is
today's show, and it jumped out when I watched the match
Is it
live.
Shigio? What up? What up? What up?
Yes, it's not a typo. That's the legitimate numbers.
Wow.
The dude had like an unreal performance in that series, absolutely going crazy, and you can see how it reflects as well. A 3.2 KD. Just unreal numbers, 13-4 in the first kills, first death department. That is the monster that DSG is currently
Photoshop is
dealing
hilarious.
with on the other side. And as we shift our focus to DSG, it's important that they try to find a way to stop this from happening again, because in that series last time, Koala basically just jammed the game down their throats. In fact, we ran a tweet in their last matchup that talked about what it's like to play M80 in scrims, and it's kind of like they just force feed you every single round, shoveling it down your throat.
The shoulder
it's not a fun
pads,
or
as they're
pleasant
saying in
experience,
chat.
and we saw that in a match environment during that previous matchup. So DSG is going to have to find a solution for that problem. And I do think it's fair. Like you've been saying, Em, and Roy, you even agreed. Em, you said DSG is kind of slept on. It's a team that doesn't get maybe the same amount of respect as some of the others based on their group stage results.
Right, and I say this just because I know some of the players on the team, and this team is essentially a really good team in the sense of they have experienced players and also very new and hungry players. So I'm very confident that they did the homework that was needed to come into the matchup today to just kind of bring a whole different game, because, I mean, last time we saw these teams go head-to-head, I feel like it didn't do justice for how DSG would normally play. So I'm really confident that they're going to be changing it up, especially because they're also having a player, Ziff, who's going to be on a different role. So that's going to be very exciting to see too.
And looking at the power ranking, the reason we wanted to show this to you is because it illustrates the strength of group all split long. We've been talking about how Group A was a little bit more wide open. Basically, you had G2, who was in a commanding position at the top of the group, but all of the other positions were open for anyone. There was a world where all of those teams had an opportunity to qualify coming into the final week, which isn't really something you say all that often. Then you look over at Group B. These are the teams that they were competing against. The Guard ranked at number 4 by most power rankings, M80 at number 5, TSM at number 6, and Mad Lions, who had a bit of a rough group stage, to be fair, still sits below them at number 9. It illustrates just how strong Group B ended up becoming. Even though, yes, Mad Lions did have a rough group stage, and Shopify's in there as well, they also had a rough group stage. That is bound to happen. This gives you an idea of the strength of schedule that DSG had, Em.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I want everyone to realize that, like you were saying, Group B was an extremely difficult group. There was 3 teams that went 4-1, and DSG Disguise came in at 2-3, so they barely scraped their way through, but they did it at the end of the day. It was a very difficult group.
Looking at that role swap that we were mentioning, though, you've got Ziff, who's now taking on the role of initiator. Coming into groups, Ziff was the sentinel for the team, and you can see just how the impact of what is effectively Exalt leaving. Now, you'll notice at the top, it's weeks 1 through 3 and week 5. We decided to scratch the matchup against M80 because no one played well against M80, so I don't want it to look like a ding against Ziff.
I mean, that's
if you look
fair.
at his previous performances in the Sentinel role,
I mean, you kind of have to look at
227 ACS, a KD of 1.19.
You're gonna have to cross that at some
then
point,
in week
right?
5, shifting to
win.
a new role of initiator, playing the
What up,
flash
King?
role,
How you doing,
specifically
buddy?
looking, I think it was Breach and KO. 0.96, 171, 0.94. Now, there's a certain amount of that you can expect because the role is more about setting up your teammates than yourself, but it was also an illustration of the struggles that this team had, Roy, because Disguised, they were trying to make pieces work that hadn't been accustomed to being put in that position before.
Yeah, Emily's optimistic. I'm going to be honest and admit that I am cautiously optimistic about this, Bach. I think the initiator is the glue of the team, and it's not a role that can be swapped around easily and still have a team function perfectly and fluidly. I do have faith again in Steel and Ocean to try to. Is extremely
How's your week been
talented,
going,
so I'm
King?
sure he can own up to the task. But you're up against Nismo, man. Nismo is such a beast, and it's such a scary like kind of prospect to be up against, right? Like you have to prove yourself against Nismo and Koala versus Ziff and Clear, right? And they don't really have that chemistry yet. They don't have that initiator duelist synergy yet built up. They have not had the reps. So I'm curious to know how that kind of pans out.
Well, you've heard what we have to say. Why don't we take a look at what the players had to say? We had a chance to sit down and talk to them about this first matchup in the MSF. Let's take a look.
Was it time for the wisdom teeth?
Like, it didn't feel like we really had to do much to beat them. Like, it was pretty obvious what they were doing. I think the one thing is, if they play like how they do in scrims, they'll definitely be a harder opponent. But if it's anything like the match that we played them the first time, then I'm not worried at all.
There was a lot of like showing up cold to the match that we had in Split 1. We were not high energy. It just sounded like we didn't want to be there. We weren't awake, whatever. And it was taking us a long time to kind of like react, and we weren't proactive at all. So when we come into this next match, we need to make sure that we're not just like coming out flat. We need to be ready to brawl from round 1.
I think it actually makes our prep a little like harder. I think since there's 2 players on different roles, they are going to play completely differently, and like their tendencies might be different. As for them, I'm unsure. I think nothing crazy changes just because it's like 1 player, but yeah.
We're not really worried. I think it's going to be as easy as it was if they had Exalt still. And if anything, they probably are even weaker now. And their comps are probably going to have to change because of like role.
Yo, he said they're weaker now.
So it's going to be
honestly
probably harder for them than it is for us.
I think maybe longer term we might have a different vision for what rules are going to happen based off of like internal, like whatever we need to kind of like set ourselves up for the most amount of success. So right now we're kind of just like, let's just finish this out. Let's not make too many drastic changes at the moment, and then we can kind of like reassess after the mid-season face-off is over.
I mean, I feel like their most talented player is like probably Clear when he's feeling it. I think he's doing really well. At least in scrims, he plays really well. But
I think Clear looks really good. I think it's a very fair assessment because sometimes Clear is kind of like streaky, right?
Like a more difficult game, but till then we'll see.
We definitely have to look out for Koala's opping. I think he can kind of just take over a game like how he did against DSG in their first game. If he's popping off, there's not really a team that can take him out.
Keys to success from M80 is just making sure that when we enter the game, we are firing on all cylinders. We are not like low energy. We need to keep the comms up. We need to play with confidence. And we need to just like look out for all their gimmick plays, and we need to know that they're gonna like run at us. They're going to always.
They still aren't allowed to use Gecko, right? Gecko won't be introduced until
that
Next
they
split?
don't get
Who are you
momentum
calling
early.
nerd, you nerd?
Even if teams are scrimmers, at the end of the day, like if you get a good start going, you can easily just replicate almost what you do in scrims if you have like crazy momentum. I mean, I guess it's dependent on player to player, but that's probably the one thing that we want to make sure that doesn't happen.
We just play our game really when we played them, and it worked out very well. So we're gonna probably continue to do that.
I think our keys to success are to get me in a clear, going early. You know, count out to a hot start, and I think we can definitely like make them a little nervous.
I'll say this to DSG: just play how you guys play in scrims, and it'll be closer. That's all.
My message to M80. Ahoy, matey.
Ahoy, matey. Why? That's so weird.
I don't know, man. I don't have a message for them, dude. I really don't.
I don't know. Just gonna have a good game.
All right. We're like, I don't even know what to do with that. So, and then now they're muted. So
But that's what you end up getting from a player like Steel, who doesn't necessarily have that level of opinion. He's just there to play his own game, doesn't care what the opponents say.
Yeah, honestly, can we talk about who is it? I think it was Koala Noob, real quick. How much smack he was talking about MAD or about Disguise. Sorry, I think it just
It's
shows
interesting
how
that they
probably going to go into this match
have
today.
new casters
also, Rico
for the
was
start of the mid-season
mentioning
invitational.
That he's a little afraid of the Koala.
I guess it's because
op,
everyone's
as
getting
he
ready for
should.
the-
Koala's been playing impressively well.
was it a complex? I think it's
in the
complexities
groups that
tournament.
we saw, so
This weekend?
that was a great video to watch of their mindset going into this match.
First of all, I want to say I'm really glad you brought that up. I love that video from Koala. I love that little bit from between them. I love the banter.
Yeah, the complexity
I think MAD is
invitational.
extremely confident, and it's showing in these interviews, right? Like they don't care who they're playing, Bach. They and Emily, they literally do not care at all. They're the number one team. They know it. They're about to act like it. But one thing I'm curious to know as kind of a final talking point for myself and for the viewers to think about as well is there is a massive stylistic difference between these two teams, right? We have MAD who have extremely strong set pieces, set executes, and things that will absolutely dismantle teams if they're not ready for it, versus DSG, who's a little bit slow, methodical. They like to read the round out. They like to make these plays, but it kind of opens them up to weaknesses in that mid round if they can't find transitions. And I'm curious to know how that ends up being between these two teams.
And that's something that we've seen from
Where's this
players
guy
like
Roy
Steel
from?
when they're in that in-game leadership position. They like to take
Should I
things
know
slow.
where he's
We saw it
from?
from some of the old heads who come from previous TAC FPS. We won't call them out by name. But we've seen their style of approach versus some of the new age players who like to move a little bit faster. One thing that makes MAD really cool too is their ability to speed switch. You'll watch them basically like snap their fingers, and all of a sudden it's an up change in tempo.
And why
that is
are neither
really
of
hard to
them
keep
on
up with. And that's kind of
Wikipedia?
what they talked about, is how Koala can basically try to just run the game down, making things very difficult for you to even get into those slow, methodical reads that you're trying to get into because you're down a player 30 seconds into the round, and you could not trade it out because he just disappeared.
Let us
like
see
Houdini.
the maps.
As we take
Let
a
us
look at
see
the map
the
pool,
maps. Let's
it is
go.
important to
Woo!
note the map pool in this series is the same map pool the last time these two teams played, just slightly scrambled. The last time they played, they started on Pearl. Haven was the second map. Ascent would have been the third map had it been necessary, but in that instance, Roy, Disguise won 5 rounds across both the first and second map, so the third map was not an option.
I wonder if
it was a bit of a stomp, wasn't it? So we barely got to see. A
I
lot
wonder
of
if
what
they'll
DSG
be
was
able
hiding.
to. I mean, they gotta come out
I'm
heavy.
curious to
in
know
it.
about the Ascent pick, right? Like
Haven, but
it's kind of a 50-50 map. You start on attack, you start on defense. I think you're pretty much
Yeah,
comfortable.
but
playing
Haven's
either
a
of those
pretty
sides.
strong
But
map
we
for
can't really
MAD,
say the
though.
same about Ascent, right? Ascent is a pretty historically defense-sided map. So I am curious to see how they're going to be up, how they're going to match up against M80's triple initiator comp, which is extremely suffocating, and it feels really hard to get anything going. And they have so many mid-round protocols and so many strategies to work off of that I'm curious to know if it'll end up different than the last time, to be honest.
Yeah, and you were mentioning the last time they played, I think it was 2 weeks ago now. So I'm actually happy that it's the same maps, just scrambled a little bit, because in my opinion, that's what I would want to do. I would want to play the similar maps because we've already played each other, right? So you have 2 weeks.
Why would you want to play the same maps when you scored 5 points?
To clean to go into a whole different map.
Why would you want to?
There is a significant amount of overlap in the map pool, which could be a contributing factor to them
Lower
still
bracket
going
finals,
back to
I
these
agree,
same
Moon.
maps If you actually look throughout the group stages, each of these teams has picked 2 of these maps twice as their pick and 1 of these maps once.
By the way,
it's
what up,
obvious
homie? How
that
you doing?
These are the maps they want to play. The bans have not really shifted much for either team. Obviously, they changed a bit from week 2 to week 3 when we saw the introduction of Lotus and Split and the removal of Bind and Breeze. But ultimately, the map pool has been the map pool for these teams. They feel comfortable where they feel comfortable, and they don't really seem like they want to break away from that all that often.
You're going with the
it
boring
really isn't all that
picks.
shocking. But we'll be seeing what they can bring because, again, it's really hard, not to look at that last matchup and think, oh my God, that's going to happen.
How you doing,
again.
homie?
It is, you're right. But to be honest, we're seeing a player who first started as a Sentinel and now going to playing a whole different agent. Roy was even saying this too. You're right. The support player is very...
Yo, Ducky! What up, big dog? TSM is overhyped. No one's hyping them. Who's hyping them? They are 100% a sleeper pick.
Quick 2-0, only got 5 rounds, like you mentioned. Doesn't really do justice. I think they just needed the time to clean up and oil up the little cracks.
Yeah,
Well,
you
Go ahead.
Yeah,
By the way, homies, do
so
me a
you
favor
mentioned
while I'm
that-
thinking
okay,
about
so,
it
you know,
early.
we're both competitors.
And before we
so
forget, make sure y'all smack
PSG,
the
it's kind of a similar map pool,
the
right?
like button for me. It
I
seems to
personally,
help
I feel
with
like
the
if I'm
algorithm.
M80, I'm
Hopefully we can, see if
almost
we can
confident
pick
in that,
up
right?
some
Like, we played them
momentum
last time, we
early.
kinda
You know
had
what I'm
an idea of
saying?
their pacing. We knew exactly how to counter them. But you're on the completely other side of the fence where you're like, well, we played these guys before. We got absolutely smashed. If you're a DSG, this is what
Yeah,
you're saying.
tappy,
We got
tappy,
absolutely
you
smashed
tappy,
on this
tappy?
map. But we know what we did
Oh,
wrong,
tappy,
and
tappy.
we can improve. And maybe didn't really get a chance to see all our entire
Yeah, I
strat
saw
book,
that,
so maybe there is some
Ducky.
kind of surprise they can pull out.
That'll be a
that
nice
maybe will not
feature
be
for
expecting. Maybe they
console
have
players.
absolutely dismantled their strategy. They have countered it. They've broken it down. They've written it down. They've studied it. I can see that actually being an option. I think that's an awesome point that you brought up.
And I think it's important to note too, M80 has not been a team throughout the group stage that's had to really counter strat or read an opponent, like really at all. They knew coming into almost every single game that they were the better opponent, and at times that did cost them. They only lost 1 map during the group stages up until that final matchup against the Guard. That was their opener against OR Esports, and they even said it maybe was first match jitters. It also could have been just assuming that the team was worse than they were.
I still
which
think
we see all
TSM
the
plays
time,
their
just kind
team,
of,
their opposition's level, which is why they haven't looked good against the teams that they needed
underestimating
to.
an opponent,
which is why
we
they're
really
not
do
ranked
see
higher.
that happen pretty consistently, and it happened a lot during this first split group stage. But then we came into the final week and they played against the Guard, and it did feel like they continued to play their own game. That's what they do. Whereas the Guard seemed like they were prepared to do the one thing that every team during this should be trying to do, which is contain Koala. And if you actually look at that series from the Guard,
Plus
that's
TSM
what
beat
DSG
M80.
should be trying to do coming into this series. They should be
I feel like
trying
Moon
to
keeps
emulate,
forgetting
at
this.
least to a certain
Oh,
degree,
no, they beat the
what
Guard.
the Guard
Sorry.
was able to do, because they
But
kept
they beat the
Koala's
Guard,
numbers
who beat
way down.
M80.
If you actually looked coming into the final week, Koala was the #1 stat leader in almost every category by a country mile. Coming to that final week, he actually drops below Kampeki in a few categories, who was a late season addition for TSM, who also had a very good couple of weeks. But you could see just how much that final game hurt, and it was because of how well the Guard held back the man known as Koala Noob, a player who has been feared throughout the group stages. It's certainly, the model has been set. They just need to try to follow it.
Yeah, and listening to Steel talk in that video too of the mindset
It is true.
going into the match versus M80 was not quite
TSM
there.
beat the Guard,
energy was
who beat
low, and
M80.
if you're a player, you know, energy and vibes.
And
are
I would
super
argue
important
that
going into a match.
in the week
And
2
if you
game
have a
against
slow start,
TSM,
sometimes it's
TSM
really
hadn't
hard
made
to just
their
kind of
roster
get
change
back
yet.
and get into there. So I think that it's good that it happened then, because right now is a whole nother bracket and that match doesn't matter. So
And I
like
think they'll
said,
end
if
up
they have the opportunity
taking
to
Haven off the
things
board
up and
for
just go in with confidence. I like to say before
M80.
a match. And yeah, I think if it Steel has the most experience on that team, obviously, and I think it'll be very important for him to make sure that his team's ready and confident going into this match and just forgetting about that quick 2-0 that happened previously.
Yeah, and circling back to a previous talking point, Bach, we were talking about the opening success and how Guard shut down Koala, right? Again, a quick statistic here: 13-4 was Koala's opening against DSG. Keep in mind that this was a 27 round series, right? Like for 2 matches, it was 27 rounds. Koala had 13 openings. That's 50% of the rounds almost were literally Koala opening up the rounds with success. That is an incredible statistic. And I think that is a massive talking point that we're going to see. But I think we're kind of overlooking a name here as well. We haven't really talked at all about Gangsta, right?
Ducky, by the way, how you been, buddy?
He's kind of the initiator player for the DSG side. He's also an incredibly talented player, but he's a little bit slept on. And he had a bit of a rough series last game as well, getting absolutely diffed by EU. And I'm curious to know if there's a bit of a narrative there as well, because if you're Gangsta, you want to prove yourself against EU, one of the top contenders for your role, pretty much.
Yeah, Gangsta was at one point in time my pick for one of the best Sovas in North America. And then once we saw the initiator role continue to build, again, I feel like it's important to note there's like multiple initiator roles. You've got initiators who are really there to flash, and then you've got your intel initiators. Well, I wonder if that'll ever change terminology wise. So Gangsta plays more of that intel initiator, looking specifically at like a Fade or a Sova. He plays a lot of those two. He was really good as the Sova. When Fade was introduced, he was one of the players who didn't really seem to adapt to the Fade as well, whereas EU
I love like poking shit in
Fade,
chat
and
sometimes.
he was one of the best Fade players coming into the tail end of VCT last year in North America, and it's no surprise
because you have everybody in chat. It's like, when are they going to start the games? I'm like, I heard you guys keep asking for them to start the games.
Still a really strong intel initiator. I do think it'll be interesting to see how he can try to adapt his gameplay to at least match the output that we've seen from EU, but I think it would be hard for anyone to match the output from EU. He's proven to be one of the #1 players or top 5 players, I should say, as he's actually competing against his own team for those positions, as pretty much everyone on M80 is in a top 10 position, statistically speaking, for the role that they play.
So, Chad, it's going to be over the course of 2 weekends.
So it will be interesting to see what Gangsta can try to do, because I do feel like he's still got it in him to return to that position of former glory as one of the top initiators in the region. But we're going to go ahead and throw things to a break. We've got some technical delays, unfortunately, before we jump into our first match. When we come back, we'll be jumping into map 1. We'll see if DSG can put up a little bit more force against M80. Stay tuned, and we'll be back in a bit.
All right, so we got ourselves a tech pause going on, a little bit of break. So, yes, this is going to be going over a course of 2 weeks. So it's today, tomorrow, Friday. We will be a little late to starting broadcast on Friday because we've got Zephyr Showdown going on out of EMEA, so we'll probably be like maybe an hour and a half late, I think. But I'm going to try and make sure everything's set up. So literally as soon as we're done casting that, I'll pop live over here for that. We may end a little early tomorrow, depending on the game. What's the game? Which one's tomorrow? The last game. Oh, yeah. The last game tomorrow's G2 and Oxygen, which will probably be a blowout. So once that starts getting out of control, we'll probably end it just because I have to be up early as well on Friday. Because we're going to be doing the APAC North versus APAC South showdown over with APAC South Hub for Apex. Friday morning. I think it's like 4 in the morning or something like that. Chad, has it got nice weather out by you guys? We're getting gorgeous weather by us, man. It's supposed to be getting even warmer tomorrow. Ooh. Oh, man. I'm wondering if I just sit down to start things off or stay standing. Chat, we should have a New interview video up tomorrow. I don't want to promise that because I got a pretty busy schedule. But it'll be up tomorrow on Friday for sure. Had a good chat with Loopy today. He's the coach and head of performance for Vexed Gaming out of the EMEA region. I think my internet just took a shit. Nope, we're fine. We dropped frames for a couple seconds. We're fine. My internet thought about it though, chat. Oh, it's still dropping frames. I think it's trying to catch up. All right, looks like it's going. Oh, no. It said, nah, just playing, fam. Back to stabilizing. Nope, back to dipping. It's dipping, it's dipping. I'm gonna guess I'm gonna have to restart here in a second. The way it's looking right now. My conversation is energized. The revolution will be televised. The retribution will be the terrorized. Maybe not. Celebration will leave you mesmerized. Got the stage set, do it big, mega size. You want me believe you? Tell some better lies. I'm in the TV room, I'm doing exercise. I let the money flow, so I live a better life. Hey, live a better life. It's like it's getting progressively better. Kind of. Sort of. Warmer. Big bucks, no whammies. Color hasn't been red. Oh, there, nope, there's the red. Oh, yellow. Oh, we're green. We're green. We're staying green. How's it look like on you guys' end? Is it just grainy? So my bit rate's tanking, but I also haven't run it at a high bit rate. But like, looks crispy on mobile. It looks like it's trying to figure its shit out. But it definitely looks like it's taking its time right now. But then, like, see, like, now it's back to green. I don't know, bro. I'm gonna roll with you guys. Y'all let me know if it starts looking weird. other than, you know, my normal weird face, but before this starts, so I'm gonna go refill my water here real quick.
Welcome back, everybody. We are about ready to get into Agent Select for our first match at Face Off. Ooh, it's going to get real spicy, really interesting. The group stage, again, I think a lot of people were kind of curious to see what our overall standings were going to reflect. Disguised getting better, but M80 has been one of our strongest teams overall. So as we approach in towards Haven, we heard plenty of breakdown from the Death Dust, but just want to get your quick thoughts here as we head on into Agent Select.
Well, obviously history doesn't bode well, right? If we just get into that, I mean, obviously 5 total rounds from Disguise against M80 last time they met, so they can really only go up from there, you would think. And I do think Disguise is a better team than what we saw that initial matchup. Like, truly, just from the eye test, I think that obviously they were dealing with roster, you know, swapping and role changing because of that roster swap, and that's a lot to deal with in a short amount of time when these, you know, weeks are so tightly packed together to try to make that adjustment, especially the initiator role, as Roy was kind of mentioning. It's the glue of the team. I mean, there's so much play facilitating and communication to create plays going on through that role that it can really kind of scramble things, especially when you're playing against an M80 team who has a guy like Koala Noob who's fearless in your face, and you're dealing with that as well as trying to like adjust everything. And here's my other thing I'll say before we get into Agent Select is Haven's a scary map to start off with because this is the map that M80's undefeated on. They had an OT win against TSM, and then they dominated OR Esports in Disguise. Meanwhile, while Disguise did well on this map, you know, during the qualification process, they've lost their last 3 games in a row. You know, their losses to TSM and OR Esports were closer than them getting when they got blown out by M80, but they still don't have like a track record of success that makes you confident.
Yeah, that's a really solid point. I think for me, looking at this Disguise team in what is surely going to be labeled as an underdog story here against an M80 team, is that here are some positives. Physically speaking, there are some eco numbers that do favor them. Like Disguised, when they get into an eco advantage, have been one of the best teams throughout the entirety of NAVCL in groups, which is great news. If they can start off hot, they can definitely put up a fight. And then more importantly so, after the role swap, we have to remember that that TSM match was really tight. All 3 maps were tremendously close. And I think both you and I, when we were getting done with that matchup, we were watching it casting over it. We kind of sat there and said, Disguised are so close to being at the same team level that TSM had. Yes, they were surviving through some heroics individually, but if they could just clean up a couple of things, they would be in a really solid position to major contenders. So you see what is the intended possible predictions as far as what we're expecting for both these 2 teams. For M80 map, as you mentioned, a long line of success, and a lot of it does come out of the breach. So assume that nothing is going to be different there. And yeah, that's indeed the case as Nismo locks in the breach.
Yeah, then on the Disguise side of things, they've been kind of rotating between playing Omen or Astra, but their last 2 games they have been on the Astra, so they decided to stick with that. They obviously do play that double initiator of Breach and Sova, so you get that. Over on the opposing side, it's the exact same thing. I mean, M80 is running the same comp that they've run every single week so far of Challengers, and why not? You know, if it's not broke, no need to fix it. So kind of a mirror matchup in that way, as Killjoy has certainly come back into the fold. It's
I can't remember if I said that they had banned Haven
And as
100%.
Strong Legs was kind of, alluding to, and something that we definitely recognize ourselves, a difference in play styles. M80 is a much more explosive team. It kind of goes with the brand, actually, when you think about, what an M80 is. They definitely can be very explosive. But I would say it's calculated explosiveness. Sometimes it is intuition plays from Kuala Nu, but other times it's really well-designed set pieces that use initiation utility to put Kuala Nu into good position. So let's see how they want to roll this pistol.
And you got to remember that in that TSM matchup, Disguised were unbelievable in their pistols. How big could that possibly
I mean, they talked about how Disguised is a
And again,
momentum
what would
team.
surely
So
be
if you
an
start
underdog
off with a
matchup,
good pistol
M80
map
on the offense,
or good pistol
could
here,
get Nismo and Orb, and then it's all just kind of hold and wait in the typical M80 kind of fashion. Try to see what utility we can bait out as they start to slowly walk their way through C-Long.
Yeah, M80 actually ranks number 3 in pistol rounds at 67% win rate. So definitely a team that's very dangerous in these early half situations. As again, they're just trying to play contact. Alarm bot is going to give it up. So it's going to cause a little bit of a rotation here from Riku, the new 5th to the team, taking up the Sentinel role from Ziff as Ziff moves to Initiators. Site will just be given for free, essentially, and it's going to be a retake set up here for Disguise. But again, they're a very methodical team in how they organize these retakes, so don't count them out.
Great shock dart comes right over the top, actually chunks out a good amount of health. Now the retake is on the way. Opening trades lead out as it will be M80 with the numbers. Nice shots from Xander in the corner, able to take down 2. And then how about the headshot?
I think I might
Clear down
restart
to
here in a second
essentially one
anyways,
shot worth
chat.
of health. 1v3 Ghost in hand, and well, John will finish him off before he could do too much else. So Disguise do not
I'm looking
take the
over at
pistol,
my
but boy, they
PC,
did
and
put
for
a lot
some
of
reason it
damage.
doesn't look. It's not looking
Indeed,
right.
they did,
for me.
but it's just kind of illustrating how well-rounded this M80 team is.
I mean, never mind. Y'all are saying on mobile looks fine.
Leading in almost every category you could feasibly think.
Like even the
but
movement's not looking
EU's in
choppy.
the top 10 in most critical fragging and damage categories, and Nismo is right there behind EU. And then you got someone like Xander who is still incredibly skilled in that controller role. So these really are one of the most star-studded lineups in Valorant. And so, definitely not surprised to see them just kind of come out brawling like that and heavy rifle by this round.
2 Ghosts in the mix here, though, for M80. So they're really just looking at these Initiators to try to get things going. And oh god,
It's
John
technically
is
not
actually
saying it's
tagged
dropping
clear
any more frames.
once
at this
again
point.
down to a very early critical health standpoint as M80 look to stack
Oh,
over
it
towards
dropped a
A-Wall.
couple, but like.
Yeah, Clear's the one you got to look out for. He has such an
I don't
incredible
think it's
skill
a big
ceiling,
deal.
but sometimes the decision-making in critical mid-round chaotic moments just isn't there. And that's what we have to watch out for this matchup, as M80, of course, having that firepower advantage, steamrolling into the A side, no problem. But let's be fair, this is what we expected in a round like this economically.
Surely it would be nice to tally at least some damage, though, if you're Disguised, which some of it does come by Riku, but can't quite finish off John over towards A-Long. So it's a sheets flawless here in the second round for M80. Off to a strong start, and this starts to pose a couple of questions, because most recently Disguised, when they were on this map versus TSM, it was the defensive half that really kind of led them astray, dropping a number of rounds in a row. 7 or 6 out of 8 in a row were won straight for TSM on
saying
their
I'm
way
dropping like
to a
50% of my
13-10 win.
frames.
Yeah,
I'm gonna just restart this real quick, chat.